My family walked away from a broken church when I was about 11 years old. Unfortunately, instead of finding a new church, we became, they walked away from Christ altogether, and we became that family that would go to church Christmas and Easter at best. I became a person that professed Jesus with my mouth, but my heart was very far from him. About 6 years ago, I realized how self-focused, how broken, and how truly separated from God that I really was. I became aware of Jesus' love for me, a love so great that he willingly separated himself from his Father to die a substitutionary death for my sins. All I had to do was turn towards him, admit my brokenness, and accept his forgiveness. He was right there, ready to accept me forever as his adopted son. So my life truly changed from that point. Listening to messages on baptism, I felt convicted to be baptized as a true believer. I do this as an outward sign of obedience for my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, fully confident in his free gifts of grace and salvation.
Well, this is Ed Matthews, and Ed, you've been here longer than I've been here, right?
About the same amount of time.
About the same amount of time. So we've kind of messed this place up together.
I think so.
I love when adults make a public proclamation of their faith, because a lot of times we do this as children, and it may or may not have even been before we received Christ truly, and Ed has realized that. And it's my thrill to baptize you today. You're a big guy, so I'm going to ask that you kind of do a crunch when I pull you up. And I don't want to sing you to glory today. But I love this man. This guy disciples men at this church. He pours into men's lives. And Ed, I really appreciate your faith in the Lord. And I'm excited about what God has ahead for you. So based on your public proclamation of your faith, I want to baptize you, my brother, in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Good job. Well, that was fun to get to baptize Ed, and I was serious about the crunch thing. That's a big man. We've got a tough sermon this morning. I want to go ahead and say on the front end, as I do sometimes, we've kind of got an R-rated text, and I'm going to try to present it as PG-13, but I'm telling you on the front end, if you have children in here, on the front end, this is a tough text, so you can make the decision whether you want to stay in here or not. I'll try to be delicate with what we're going to talk about, but it is a tough text. Let me pray for us as we start. Father, Genesis 34 to me is a struggle and hard to understand and hard to feel all the emotions in this text. Father, I know statistically that we have folks in this room that have been sexually assaulted, have been sexually abused, some by their fathers, their uncles, brothers, friends. And Father, I pray that you would take the words of this text and the sermon today, that you would encourage them, that you would show them how you redeem everything and how you always are present, even when we don't think you are, and that you will protect us and that you will take all of this pain and use it somehow to your glory. Father, I thank you for tough text. It reminds us that the Bible doesn't just show us the bright points, but it shows us everything, warts and all. It's in your name we pray. Amen. So statistically, 1 out of 3 women in here have been sexually abused in some form or another, usually by someone close to you statistically, someone that you loved or thought that you loved, that loved you. This text today, there's a rape scene that happens in this text. I don't think this text is predominantly about that, so we're going to kind of course over that. I think there's more application on the flip side. I think this text mainly is about a father's passivity and lack of desire and energy to protect his daughter. I'm going to start by looking at the end of chapter 33. chapter 33 we looked at last week. If you'll go with me to verse 18. And Jacob came safely to the city of Shechem. We talked about last week, that is not where Jacob was supposed to go. Jacob was supposed to go to Bethel. Beth in the Hebrew means house, El God, house of God. But instead, Jacob wanted to make money. And Shechem was a place that he could go to make money. And he probably reasoned it's only about 20 miles away. He could check back into Bethel and he can kind of be sort of obedient. So look again at verse 18. He goes to Shechem, which is in the land of Canaan, on his way from Padan Aram, and he camped before the city. And from the sons of Hamor, Shechem's father, he bought for 100 pieces of money the piece of land on which he had pitched his tent. We talked about last week that a patriarch was only supposed to purchase land to bury the dead. He was never supposed to purchase land and dwell somewhere because they were moving to a promised land that had not been given to them yet. This was a man trying to make money. This is a man that you're going to see that's more concerned about his work and his business and the next promotion and the next deal than he is about his children and about his marriage and about his wife. This is a man that has his priorities out of order. We talked about last week that he is partially obedient, but partial obedience is always full disobedience. And how do we know this? Look at chapter 35. Go ahead of 35. Look at verse 1. God said to Jacob, "Arise, go up to Bethel and dwell there. Make an altar there to the God who appeared to you when you fled from your brother Esau." So on the front end of chapter 34, God has made clear while he was in Bethel that when you're done, you come back to this spot. After chapter 34, he says, go back to this spot, the spot that I originally told you to go to. When you look at chapter 34 and you're reading in your quiet times, you go Genesis 1 all the way through 33, you hit chapter 34 and you're like, what in the heck? Why is this chapter here? The reason this chapter is here is because the end of chapter 33 and the beginning of chapter 35, you've got a man that is not being obedient. So he takes his tent and he camps outside of Shechem. Does that sound familiar to another dad we looked at earlier in Genesis? You remember Lot? Lot is outside of Sodom. Now he's inside Sodom. Now he's a leader in Sodom, and his two daughters married two pagan guys, or pledged to be married to two pagan guys, and the whole family falls apart. And they die in Sodom except for except for Lot and his daughters. You've got another man here that's getting too close and not protecting his family. So this chapter is here, dads, to let you know that you've got a responsibility to your little girls. And we're going to hit that dad-daughter relationship a little bit here as well. My concern as we head this text, I fear that some of us are living kind of holy but not quite. Kind of obedient, but not really. That God, I can come to Osteridge Bible Church on Sunday, I can listen to the message, I can take notes, I can nod my head, but on Friday I can be a totally different person. That God is not just a piece of the pie, you need to realize that God is the whole entire pie. That God is just as present at your workplace as he is here on Sunday morning when you're singing worship songs. And so he has got his family in a mess. How do things go when you are not where God wants you to be? How do things go when you do not do what God wants you to do? How do things go when you are saying things that God does not want you to say? This man's partial obedience is going to turn into a full disobedience for his children, and his whole family is going to pay for it. Another thing I want you to know as we go through this text, the narrator, Moses, doesn't refer to Jacob as Israel, although that's his name now. He refers to him as Jacob because he's being his old Jacob-type self. Well, let's go to chapter 34. Verse 1, now Dinah, the daughter of Leah. The narrator wants you to know this is the one daughter who comes from Leah, the one that's not favored by Jacob. This is the one that he doesn't love. And I assume from this text, he doesn't really care much for Dinah either. He probably doesn't pay any attention to Dinah, which the text is going to show you and I today. So this is Leah's daughter, probably just in the way of Jacob's plans, whom she had borne to Jacob, went out to see the women of the land. Now that little phrase, went out to see, literally in the Hebrew means went to see and to be seen. You've got Dinah, who's probably at this point, most scholars believe about 15 or 16 years old as far as how long they've been gone from Padan Aram. You've got a dad who's about 110 who's thinking about how to build a company, how to make money, how to gather assets. And so like most girls at the age of 15 or 16, she's starting to want to see what life's all about. So she leaves home to go into the city unchaperoned. I doubt Leah knew she left the house. I think she snuck out. I don't think Rachel knew she left the house. And I don't think Jacob's ever in the house to even know what's going on. And she's going into this town, and she's dressing to impress, and she kind of wants to see what's going on. A big part of my job as a dad to a daughter is to protect my daughter. My daughter may say, Dad, not all boys are the same. You don't even know him. And I'm going to say, all boys are the same. I don't have to know him. And so this little girl is all alone in Shechem. Verse 2, and when Shechem, the son of Hamor, so Hamor is the king, Shechem's the prince, the next in line, the Hivite, the prince of the land, saw her, he seized her and lay with her and humiliated her. He sees her, he seizes her, he lays with her, which means he rapes her, and he humiliates her. That language is the same language used in Genesis chapter 3. When Eve saw the fruit, she took the fruit and she ate the fruit. It's the same terminology used in Genesis chapter 6, verse 2, when it says, the sons of God saw the women or the daughters of men and took them and did whatever they wanted with them. What happened in Genesis 3, what happened in Genesis 6, I believe is also happening right here in Genesis chapter 34 as well. He saw, he seized, he took, he humiliated her. Now here's what gets me. This little girl has 11 brothers to protect her, and she's all alone in Shechem. My daughter, and I've shared this before, my daughter had this little thing that we used to do when she was real little. She couldn't even hardly stand up and walk yet. I'd always say, never fear. And she'd go, Daddy's here. And we still do it today. She'll get down, and I'm trying to encourage her. I'll say, honey, never fear. And she goes, Daddy's here. There's something to her. If my daddy's around, if my daddy's present, everything's going to be okay. And now as she's gotten older, I'm starting to talk to her about, really, God the Father is always there even when I'm not there. Never fear, your Father's here. And that she's going to use that as she gets older. But no one's protecting this little girl. And let me tell you something. When no one protects a little girl, boys are going to fill the gap. Daddies, you need to understand that little girls are going to get love from somebody, somewhere. Part of my job is to cuddle with my daughter. Part of my job is to date my daughter. My daughter and I go on a date every week or two. And we'll go to a movie, we'll go to main event, we'll go to dinner, and we just talk, and we just spend time. We'll shop. I go in all these little trinket stores that just you could blow it up and nobody would care. And we just spend time together. Why? Because one day she's going to date a boy. And that boy may try something. And I want my daughter to know that's not the way I'm supposed to be touched. That's not the way a date's supposed to happen. I also want her to understand when that happens and she will get mistreated, that she can come back to her daddy and say, hey, Dad, can I talk to you about something? Something happened last night that it didn't sit right with me. Can I talk to you? I don't want her always going to her mama. I don't want her always going to her friends. Her friends are morons. I want her to come to me. Daddy, you don't know him. I don't have to. Here's what you can say to your kid. Try this one on. You've never been my age. I've been your age. They can't say anything about that. I know more about boys than my daughter does because I've been one. Look at verse 3. And his soul was drawn to Dinah, the daughter of Jacob. He loved the young woman and spoke tenderly to her. Do you see how confused and jacked up this kid is? He doesn't know the difference between love and lust. It says he loved her and he spoke tenderly to her. he rapes her, and then he speaks nice words to her. You think that still happens today? You bet it does. I can't tell you how many times I've sat down with young ladies. I know he loves me. Well, how do you know he loves me? Because he tells me. But he also abuses me, and he also treats me poorly. But he tells me he loves me. Ladies, here's what love is. It is sacrificial action. Sacrificial action is love. A guy can tell you he loves you all he wants, because here's what guys do. Guys give love to get sex. Girls give sex to get love. Guys will say, I love you, so that they can have you. Guys don't get you until they show you sacrificial love by action. Could you imagine if God sent Jesus down? Jesus stood up and says, hey, I just want you all guys to know, God loves you and I love you. I'm going back up now. Wouldn't mean anything. So he dies on a cross. Sacrificial love. Love in action. Just because a kid tells you he loves you, this kid doesn't know what he thinks. He's so messed up. He says he loves me. He has no idea what love means. This guy's so confused. His family, his culture, as you're going to see, is so messed up. I loved you should not cloud the things, young ladies, that you see in a guy's character. Because girls always think, I'll fix him. Can't fix somebody. Some women today even think, well, I've already been intimate with him, so I have to marry him. Well, I've already been with him this long, so I have to marry him. No, you don't. You have to run. You have to get away from that guy and run from him. Let's see what happens in this story. Verse 5. Now Jacob heard that he had defiled his daughter Dinah, but his sons were with his livestock in the field, so Jacob held his peace until they came. And Hamor, the father of Shechem, went out to Jacob to speak with him. Jacob hears about it. It's the worst day, the nightmare scenario for a father to hear that your daughter has been defiled. Now, when you read that verse, when I read that verse, it feels mature and wise, doesn't it? It feel like Jacob said, you know what? I'm not going to overreact. I'm not going to respond in a bad way. I'm just going to wait a minute. You're going to see in the rest of the story that's not his mature response. It is an attitude of he does not care about Dinah. It's an attitude about he's a passive man. Since Genesis 3, the habit of men, guys, has been passivity. That we just kind of let things unfold in front of us, how they're going to unfold, and then we'll critique the results after it happens. That's what a lot of guys at church do. They'll come in, they never serve, they never give, you never hear a word from them until they complain about something. And so Jacob is this passive guy. He's heard about it. You hear no plan, no outrage. I would like to hear some outrage. Let me tell you something. If I get this news, I'm going to the gun safe. All right? And I know it's one of the Big Ten. But I'm going to the gun safe. Someone better speak into me on the way from me hearing about it to me getting in front of the guy who did it. All right? You don't hear that from Jacob. Jacob's sin here is what theologians call a sin of omission. Guys, gals, sin is not just what you do. A lot of times it's what you don't do. A lot of times it's a sin of omission. This never would have happened if Jacob had not been in Shechem. This wouldn't have happened in Bethel. This is happening because this man has partial obedience or disobedience, and now his family is at risk so that his business can prosper. The 401k is skyrocketing while his daughter is going to be defiled and taken advantage of. And let me tell you something, guys. When you don't lead your family, someone's going to step up and lead your family. What you're going to see in this text is you got 11 farming redneck brothers who are now going to take charge because Jacob's not willing to step up and take charge. Look at verse 7. The sons of Jacob had come in from the field as soon as they heard of it. And the men were indignant and very angry because he had done an outrageous thing in Israel by lying with Jacob's daughter, for such a thing must not be done. This is what I would call good fury, righteous indignation. This to me should have been the emotion that we read about in verse 6 and in verse 5 when Jacob finds out about it. Our culture tells us, don't be angry. There is a time, my friends, to be angry. There is a time for righteous men to take a stand and be furious. There is a time when righteous indignation is the right approach. We live in a culture that says, don't judge. Everyone has their own opinion. Just because it's wrong for you doesn't mean it's wrong for me. There are some things in culture that are wrong for everybody. Defiling a young woman is wrong, and it doesn't matter what your opinion is about it. And so Jacob shows no emotion. The sons show some emotion. Look at verse 8. But Hamor spoke with them, saying, the soul of my son Shechem longs for your daughter. Please give her to him to be his wife. One thing I want you to notice, they never named this girl in the whole text. My son, who raped your daughter, now wants to marry your daughter. If we can just have a wedding, all this stuff will be behind us, and it'll fix it, and we'll all be good. So this is what this tells me. Hamor and Shechem don't even see what happens as a sin. I think Hamor and Shechem had been taking women, seizing women, raping women whenever they saw a pretty woman, whenever they felt like it. And there was no sense of wrongness in these men's hearts. Just like the men at Lot and Sodom and Gomorrah. No sense of wrong. And let me tell you something too. Not only are little boys in our culture confused, but little girls are confused. Little girls don't know how to dress anymore. They dress inappropriately because guess where they get their cues from? Their mamas. When a mom is not modest in her dress, you start watching how the girl wants to push the envelope. Have you read a People teen magazine lately? Or a 17 magazine lately? Moms will look at their daughters, and I saw this because my kids went through Lakeway Elementary and they went through Hudson Bend Middle School. And the pressure from moms would start about 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade for their little girls and their little boys to start dating and to have a boyfriend and a girlfriend. It's ridiculous. Because they wanted to somehow live their life vicariously through these little kids. And you'd watch these moms come up to the elementary school, and they would have, in the middle school, and they would have their tennis shirt dresses on, whatever you call them, skirts. And they're just not being modest. And let me tell you, you got 7th and 8th grade boys whose hormones are kicked into overdrive. And I'm thinking, lady, what are you thinking? You're not helping. You see, in our culture it says she has pride of herself. That's self-esteem. That's being who you are. That's being true to who you are. No one's thinking about the kids. And we'll look at our daughters when they get to high school and we'll say, here's a condom. Here's how you use it. Here's birth control, just to be careful, just to be safe. That's exactly what Jacob's doing. Jacob's just saying, hey, here's Shechem. Good luck. And she's all alone. And we may say, well, who are we to judge about our kids? I'll tell you who's to judge. Dads, you're the one to judge. Dads, you're to protect your daughters. I don't care if your daughter says for 4 or 5, 6 years, I hate you. Well, that's okay. I'm your daddy. And I'm going to take care of you. Dads, you cuddle with your daughters. Dads, you date your daughters. Moms, you protect your daughter's reputation. You protect the testimony of your daughter. You protect the hearts of your daughters. Some dads can't be fathers to their own daughters because they're so perverted themselves. Some dads can't do what I'm talking about. They can't cuddle with their daughter because they're looking at pictures of other girls online that are not much older, if any, than their daughter. Some moms can't do what I'm talking about because they're flirtatious in public. They dress immodestly in public. And the daughters know it. Ephesians says this, among God's people there should not be a hint of immorality. A hint. Where do sick young men get their training? From sick, old, perverted dads. Hamor comes up to Jacob. Hey, my son really wants your daughter. Doesn't even mention what happened. This will fix it all. Look at verse 9. Make marriage with us. Give your daughters to us and take our daughters for yourselves. You shall dwell with us, and the land shall be open to you. Dwell and trade in it, and get property in it. So let's have a merger. Women in this text are just seen as commodities, aren't they? They're like baseball trading cards with these men. And here's what gets me. In our culture, the culture says that Christianity holds women down. Biblical men, theologically centered men, protect and cherish and nourish women, love women. The culture and non-believers see women as commodities to be traded. And let me tell you something, just because a guy goes to church and says he's a Christian doesn't mean he's a theologically centered, Jesus-loving man. How do you know if he is or not? Wait and see. His action, not what he tells you, what he shows you. That's why, girls, you got to date a guy a while. You got to meet his friends. You got to meet his parents. You got to know this guy. And so he said, let's have a merger. What Hamor is promising Jacob here is what God had promised Israel. If you trust me, I'll give you land, I'll give you blessing, I'll give you wealth, success, I'll give it all to you. Now Hamor comes along as the enemy and says, here's a shortcut to the promised land. You can have an open door to the promised land right now. Does that sound familiar to someone else in your New Testament? Jesus, the actual fulfillment of Israel, the one who is without sin, who doesn't have to be told by the scriptures to remember because he never forgets. Jesus, after being baptized like we saw today and being told by the Father and the Spirit, this is my Son in whom I'm well pleased, gets taken away immediately to the wilderness to be tempted by Satan. And what does Satan tempt him with? If you just bow down and worship me, everything you see, all this land will be yours. So you have Hamor doing what Satan did in your New Testament. A shortcut through the promised land will never lead you to the blessings of God. Partial disobedience is full disobedience. And what full disobedience does, it leads you always, and those around you that you love, it leads you to unnecessary pain. Verse 11. Shechem also said to her father and to her brothers, let me find favor in your eyes, and whatever you say to me, I will give. Ask me for as great a bride price and gift as you will, and I will give whatever you say to me. Only give me the young woman to be my wife. I mean, this guy, I believe he's just in heat. He's a perverted kid who's in heat. He's like, I'll tell me how many zeros to add to the check. Just give that woman to me. Now, I'm going to say something I've never said in a sermon, I never say in my house, but I'm going to say it today, okay? If I'm sitting there and I'm Jacob or the sons and Shechem starts talking, I'm going to say, dude, shut up. I can't believe you're even here. I can't, I would hurt somebody. Your pastor would go ballistic. Here's the point, dads. If a father does not lead his family, someone else will. Look at verse 13. The sons of Jacob answered Shechem and his father, Hamor, deceitfully. So it's not that they didn't pick anything up from their father Jacob. They picked some things up from father Jacob. They learned to deceive just like good old dad. By the way, dads, if you're never proactive in your action and your words, your sons and daughters will pick things up from you. It'll always be your negative traits. They spoke deceitfully. Now, who hasn't spoken yet? Jacob. Jacob's here the whole time, has not said a word. Because he had defiled their sister Dinah. They said to them, we cannot do this thing to give our sister to one who is uncircumcised, for that would be a disgrace to us. Only on this condition will we agree with you that you will come, that you will become as we are by every male among you being circumcised. Then we will give our daughters to you, and we will take your daughters to ourselves, and we will dwell with you and become one people. But if you will not listen to us and be circumcised, then we will take our daughter and we will be gone. It's amazing to me, these sons are taking the covenant sign of trusting in God at this time, circumcision. And they're using it as a pawn in their scheme to commit murder. By the way, I'm so glad that we have a new covenant. We get baptized instead of circumcised. And that's a lot better. That's warm water right there. And he's telling these men, you got to get circumcised. Look at verse 18. Their words pleased Hamor and Hamor's son Shechem. And the young man did not delay to do this thing because he delighted in Jacob's daughter. Now he was the most honored of all his father's house. So Hamor and his son Shechem came to the gate of their city and spoke to the men of their city, saying, These men are at peace with us. Let them dwell in the land and trade in it, for behold, the land is large enough for them. Let us take their daughters as wives, and let us give them our daughters. So they go to the city gate. They talk to all the men. And they're like, we're going to get circumcised because that's what we have to do business with these folks. They don't tell them about Dinah. They don't tell them about what Shechem's wanting. They just tell them with this business plan that we got enough room and we'll make a lot of money and this will be great. And they got some hot women and we got some girls that we need to load off on somebody. And let's make a deal. And by the way, when he agrees to be circumcised, Shechem and Hamor, what they're agreeing to in your Old Testament is they're agreeing to convert to the God of Israel. Do you think these two guys are converting? Do you think these two guys are actually wanting to follow God? Do we have men who will take girls, this naive, pretty little godly women will meet this meathead? And do we have guys that will tell girls that they will convert to get those women? All the time. Some girl meets this guy and it's like, well, I believe in God and it's important to me that you're a Christian. He goes, well, I believe in God. Okay. Well, I go to Austin Ridge Bible Church. Will you come to Austin Ridge Bible Church with me? Sure, I'll go with you. Okay. Girls, come on. Well, you got to pray to receive Jesus. And if you say this prayer and you really mean it in your heart and you become a Christian, and we can be together. Okay. Then after I pray, can we get naked? That's exactly what these guys are doing. We'll get converted. We'll do whatever we need to do. Fake conversion. And here's the true motivation. The true motivation of what they're trying to do. Verse 22. Only on this condition will the men agree to deal with us to become our one people. When every male among us is circumcised as they are circumcised, will not their livestock, their property, and all their beasts be ours? See, there's the scheme. Hey, guys, if we do this, we got passive men, we got clueless sons, and we got naive women. We're going to get everything. By the way, a lot of people in this story think that the men in this story of the town are innocent. They're not innocent. They're in this plot to take and use and abuse and deceive a whole people group and to take their women and do with them what they want. Only let us agree with them and they will dwell with us. And all who went out of the gate of the city listened to Hamor and his son Shechem, and every male was circumcised. All who went out of the gate of the city, all the men agree to get circumcised. Now, if I'd have been there, I'd hope I'd say, excuse me, I got a question. I'm out. All the men agree to this. If we were to go out to the city of Austin today and say, hey, we're the men of Austin Ridge, we've got some really pretty women. And by the way, we have pretty women that come to Austin Ridge, and they're pretty on the outside too. And we got some women, and you can have your pick. And by the way, you can take all our stuff too. You think there'd be any takers in the city? Well, first you got to actually come to church and act like you believe what we believe. Yeah, I'll do that. All the men. It's interesting how the Bible takes the crime that's committed here and the punishment of circumcision, which is basically the same thing happening on a male's body, which would have happened on a female's body. A desolation of the reproduction organs. Verse 25. This is where this text gets very applicable. On the third day, when they were sore, two of the sons of Jacob, Simeon and Levi, the narrator wants you to know there's Jacob's sons, but it's Dinah's brothers, which means their mama is who? Leah. Two brothers that probably weren't cared for too much and probably weren't loved too much. Simeon and Levi, Dinah's brothers, took their swords and came against the city while it felt secure and killed all the males. In the Hebrew, it happens boom, boom, boom. There's no description. They got their sword. They went to town. They killed every male. Now, to be honest with you, I can relate to these guys. They shouldn't go kill everybody, but I can get the desire that was in their heart at this point. They knock on every door. Susan comes to the door. Can I help you? Hey, is Frank around? Well, he's on the couch. He can't get up. That's okay. I'll come in. Sword, boom. House to house. Yelling, screaming. No one can run, right? And then they wait to the end. And look what they do at the end. Kind of save the best for last. Verse 26. They killed Hamor and his son Shechem with the sword and took Dinah out of Shechem's house and went away. Did you see what just happened there? He sees Dinah, he seizes her, he lays with her, he humiliates her, and all this time, Dinah's been a prison back in his house. You see why the sons are so mad? They have yet to even see their sister, speak to their sister. They don't even know what she's thinking at this point. And now these guys are coming to Israel saying, if we write you a fat check, we want to take the rest of your women and we want to treat them the way we've treated Dinah. You see, dad's a coward, so the sons say, we're going to do something. These sons, most scholars believe, are anywhere between the age of 18 and 25 at this point, able to fight. Young guys like to fight. Old guys are too old, too tired. You ever see like a young guy with a pretty girl and you just look at him, you see a couple, the guy's like, hey, you looking at my woman? You looking at me? No, I'm not looking at you. If someone looks at my wife when I'm walking, I see they're checking my wife out, I'm like, yeah. I'm not thinking I want to fight. I'm tired. I'm not saying what these guys did is right. Please understand that. But I can relate. I understand. I can relate better to their emotion and their action than I can to Jacob's passivity and non-action. So they killed Hamor and Shechem. Verse 27, the sons of Jacob came upon the slain and plundered the city because they had defiled their sister. They took their flocks and their herds, their donkeys, and whatever was in the city and in the field, all their wealth, all their little ones, and their wives, all that was in the houses, they captured and plundered. They said, you know what, you're going to take our daughter and do that to her. We're going to take all your women. You're going to take some of our stuff. We're going to take all your stuff. And by the way, these women became a thorn in the side of Israel for the next generations to come because they're Canaanite women. And they take it all. Angry people tend to overreact at times. They took the jewelry, the china, the women, the children, the crops, the livestock. And now, Jacob's finally going to say something. Jacob's finally going to speak. What do you think he'd say at this point? Look at verse 30. Then Jacob said to Simeon and Levi, doesn't even talk to Dinah. There's no sense of him saying, hey, Dinah, how you doing? Are you okay? I'm so sorry. Nothing. Then Jacob said to Simeon and Levi, you have brought trouble on me by making me stink to the inhabitants of the land, the Canaanites and the Perizzites. My numbers are few, and if they gather themselves against me and attack me, I shall be destroyed, both I and my household. Are you kidding me? Your daughter just got violated, and all Jacob is doing is thinking of himself. I got to be honest with you. And I don't think I've ever said this about another biblical character. I don't like Jacob. I just don't like him. Most of the time I find myself pulling for Esau in this story. Jacob's this passive dad who just tries to think about how to make more money while his kids and his family and everybody around him is dying. I think this is the low point of his life. How this affects me. My family. And by the way, this is no longer his family anyway. Guys, if you don't lead your family, someone else will step up and lead. And by the way, dads, I and me are not daddy language. It's you and us. You and us is daddy language. I and me goes out the window when you get a kid. Here's the problem with Jacob. You're not even supposed to be in this place. And now he's blaming the sons for what's happened, for his passivity. How many parents are more concerned about their business and their money and their hobbies and their social life than they are about how their teenage daughter or their teenage son is doing? And Moses is a phenomenal storyteller. I love how he ends this text. He gives the sons the last word. Verse 31, but they said, should he treat our sister like a prostitute? We would rather die with dignity than to live with shame. I think little girls in our culture are confused. I think young men in our culture are confused because I think parents are confused because I think parents are more concerned about money than they are their families. There's three types of guys I see in the world mainly, outside of Jesus-loving guys, and sometimes they cross over. Number one, you see people like Shechem. They're just perverts. And they see women as commodities and objects for their own pleasure. Number two, you see men like Jacob who are passive cowards. They just kind of let life go by and whatever happens, happens. And then you see men like Jacob's sons. They may even have a sense of justice, but they're going to get violent. They're thugs. So you have perverts, and you have cowards, and you have thugs apart from a relationship with Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ makes you fearless, and it makes you have priorities, and he makes you have values, and he makes you protect your little girls and protect your little boys and love their mama, which, by the way, is the best way to protect. I'd love for Jacob to stand up and say, you know what, boys? What you did was wrong. What we need to do is we need to trust the Lord. We don't take our own vengeance, and we're going to wait for him to fulfill the promises. That's not what he did. Matter of fact, keep your finger there. Turn with me over to Genesis 49. The only good part I see of Jacob's life is when he's dying, which is a sad testimony. And on his deathbed, he seems to have some wisdom. He gives a blessing. We're going to get here in a few weeks, but I'm going to go ahead and show you. 49, verse 5. He gives a blessing to Simeon and Levi, or really a curse. Simeon and Levi are brothers. Weapons of violence are their swords. Let my soul come not into their counsel. O my glory, be not joined to their company. For in their anger they killed men, and in their willfulness they hamstrung oxen. Here's what they did. They went up to the oxen, and they didn't just take the oxen. They slit the backs of the calves so the oxen could never be used again. They destroyed the city from existing. Verse 7, cursed be their anger, for it is fierce, and their wrath, for it is cruel. I will divide them in Jacob and scatter them in Israel. So this story also shows me that backsliding is possible even for the saint, right? Backsliding is possible. That you can be walking with God and then something happens, right? It doesn't even have to be something happening. And you stop walking with him the same way. Let me give you a few points. We'll close with these about backsliding. Because I see this in Jacob's life, and what I relate to in Jacob's life is I've had seasons and times of backsliding. Number one, backsliding is possible. And it's usually after a spiritual moment. It's usually after a great camp or a great spiritual high or a great Sunday morning of worship. I think Satan jumps in all your cars when you get in after the sermons and they just fill your kids up and all that chaos starts happening. It's possible, and it's usually after a great time of great spiritual place. There's no place where you'll ever graduate from the possibility of backsliding again. Number two, backsliding is subtle. I'm close to Bethel. I can go back and forth. It's kind of what guys will do. They'll say, you know what, I'm not a saint, but I'm not as bad as some. I'm okay. I'm just kind of there. It's so subtle. Number three, backsliding is dangerous. They've been in this place almost 10 years. And it's not that this happened on the first day. It never happens on the first day. First year passes, the second year passes, and it's just so subtle, and then this happens. It's so subtle. And who really suffers from a parent's compromise? It's always the kids. The parents don't take it on the nose. The kid takes it on the nose. Number four, backsliding is stubborn. What does God have to do to get Jacob's attention? He wrestled with him all night. Remember that? 10 years later, he's still trying to get this guy's attention. So there's a rape, there's massive murder, there's tragedy, and there's danger, and he finally gets his attention. He finally blasts him out of the pew, if you will. And I've seen God blast plenty of guys and girls out of the pews. Number five, backsliding withholds God's blessing. Look in the next chapter. We'll be there next week. Look at verse 9, 35:9. God appeared to Jacob again. This is when he's back in Bethel. When he came from Padan Aram and blessed him. God, I want your blessing, but I want to go to Shechem. God, I want your blessing, but I want to make more money. God, I want your blessing, but I want someone else to raise my kids because I don't have the energy or time or desire. Our daughters need a curfew, and they need their daddies to cuddle with them. They need their daddies to date them. They need mamas who show them how to dress. They need mamas who show them how to act around men. Our little boys need to know what it means to treat women well. I want Austin Ridge to be a safe place for women to flourish. You see, Jesus, our brother, reconciles us to God, our Father, so that me, a brother, to you, a sister, can see you as a sister and not as an object. That you're my sisters. And women, that these men in here are your brothers. And may two believers never do something like this to another believer. That we protect these women and we honor these men. And later on, Jesus is going to be born out of this mess of a family. Isn't that cool? God loves to take the worst situations and bring the greatest gifts. I think it could have happened a lot quicker in Jacob's life, but he had to go through 10 more years at Shechem because he was in the wrong place, not being a good daddy. Dads, we've got a great men's ministry here. TJ Morelli, you need to call him up if you're not involved. Attendance is not enough at Austin Ridge. You need to call up TJ Morelli or email him. You need to say, TJ, I need some men in my life. And you need to get connected to the men's ministry this fall. We got stuff kicking off this fall. You need to be connected. And don't use the excuse, well, I travel a lot. We'll find a time you're in town. We'll do it on Sunday morning or at 5 a.m. Don't use the excuse. Well, I need some family time. Think about that when you're going 5 days a week. You need some Jesus time, brother. Because you need to be a daddy to these kids. This is all we got. Luke and Lydia is my legacy. Austin Ridge isn't my legacy. That's Jesus' legacy. My legacy is Luke and Lydia. If those two kids love Jesus all their heart, I'm good with everything else. Amen? Father, we thank you for this text. Father, I thank you that you put a chapter 34 in our Bible. We're not going to skip over it. We're not going to jump to chapter 35. We're going to go right through it. And Father, I know that you redeem messes. And Father, I lift up people in this room that have been sexually abused or physically abused or emotionally abused. I pray that they would not see you as their father through the same lens that they see another father or brother or man who has hurt them. I pray, Father, that you would redeem, you would restore, and you would love them well. They would trust you because you are the Father who never hurts. It's in the name of that Father we pray. Amen.